He lay perfectly still on the leather sofa, the soft glow of the fireplace painting gentle shadows across the ceiling of the grand living room. To anyone watching, Arthur Whitmore looked like a man finally defeated by exhaustion, mouth slightly open, breathing slow and deep, one arm dangling toward the floor as if sleep had claimed him without warning. In truth, his eyes were barely closed, lashes resting just enough to hide the sharp awareness behind them. Arthur Whitmore had built an empire from nothing. Every success he had earned came from watching carefully, listening more than he spoke, and testing people when they least expected it. Wealth had brought him comfort, yes, but also loneliness and distrust. Too many smiles had proven fake. Too many hands had reached out only when they wanted something. Tonight was no different, or so he thought. From the hallway came the quiet sound of slippers against marble. Lillian moved gently, as she always did, careful not to disturb the house, or its owner. She had worked for Arthur for nearly 5 years now, arriving before sunrise and leaving long after dusk. She cleaned, cooked, organized, and kept the massive home breathing with quiet order. She was efficient, respectful, and almost invisible. Arthur noticed that too. Trailing behind her was her 6-year-old daughter, Maya. Arthur hadn't planned for the child to be here this evening. Lillian had explained earlier that her usual babysitter had fallen ill, and she had nowhere else to leave Maya. Arthur had waved it off without much thought. Children were noise and chaos, and he assumed she'd keep the girl out of sight. But now, as he lay pretending to sleep, he sensed them near. Mama, Maya whispered, her small voice filled with awe as she took in the vast room. This house is bigger than our whole street. Lillian smiled softly. Hush, baby, we don't talk loud here. Mr. Whitmore is resting. Arthur's heart gave a small, curious thump. He focused on keeping his breathing steady. Maya stepped closer, her tiny footsteps stopping just a few feet from the sofa. Arthur could almost feel her eyes on him. Children stared without shame, without calculation. That alone made him uneasy. Is he sick? Maya asked. No, Lillian replied quietly. Just tired. He works very hard. Maya tilted her head. He looks lonely. Arthur froze inside. Lillian paused. Why do you say that? Because, Maya said thoughtfully, when people have big houses but no pictures of people smiling, it means they don't have anyone to laugh with. Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. Lillian gently guided her daughter away from the sofa toward the window. We don't judge people, sweetheart. We don't know his life. I know, Maya said, lowering her voice even more. But Mama, I don't like when grown-ups are sad and pretend they're not. Arthur's mind raced. This wasn't the test he had planned, but he didn't move. Lillian sighed, kneeling to Maya's level. The world isn't fair to everyone. Some people have money. Some people have love. Some are still looking for both. Maya nodded, then leaned closer to her mother and whispered something that made Arthur's pulse stop. If I was rich like him, I'd buy time, Maya said. So you wouldn't be so tired all the time, Mama. Arthur's fingers twitched against the leather. Lillian swallowed hard. Oh, baby, I'd buy you rest, Maya continued, completely unaware of the man listening to every word. And I'd buy myself a daddy who doesn't leave. The silence that followed was heavy, fragile. Lillian pulled Maya into her arms. Some things can't be bought, she said softly. But love finds us in other ways. Maya rested her head against her mother's shoulder. Do you think Mr. Whitmore ever wanted a family? Arthur's breath nearly caught. I don't know, Lillian said honestly. But I do know this, people who've been hurt sometimes build walls instead of homes. Arthur felt exposed in a way no business rival had ever managed. Maya looked back toward the sofa. Mama, if he wakes up, can I give him a hug? Lillian chuckled quietly. Let's not wake him. Rich men aren't used to hugs from little girls. But maybe that's why he's sad, Maya said simply. Arthur had heard enough. He shifted slightly, letting out a soft groan as if waking naturally. Lillian jumped to her feet, startled, pulling Maya behind her instinctively. I'm so sorry, sir, Lillian said quickly. I didn't mean to disturb you. Arthur opened his eyes slowly and sat up, rubbing his face. No, it's quite all right. Maya peeked out from behind her mother, her eyes wide but curious. I must have fallen asleep, Arthur said, his voice quieter than usual. He looked at Maya. And you must be Maya. She nodded. Yes, sir. You don't have to call me sir, he said gently. Arthur will do. Maya smiled. Okay, Arthur. Lillian held her breath. Arthur studied the child for a long moment, then looked at Lillian. You're raising a very perceptive young lady. Lillian stiffened. I hope she didn't say anything inappropriate. Arthur shook his head. On the contrary, she said something important. He turned back to Maya. Do you always tell the truth like that? Maya shrugged. Mama says lies make your heart heavy. Arthur let out a soft laugh, the first genuine one in years. Would you like some hot chocolate? He asked suddenly. Maya's eyes lit up. She looked at her mother for permission. Lillian hesitated, then nodded. As they sat together at the long kitchen island, something shifted in the house. Arthur poured the milk himself. Maya talked about school, about her favorite books, about how her mama sang when she thought no one was listening. Lillian watched, unsure whether to smile or worry. When Maya finished her drink, Arthur cleared his throat. Lillian, he said, serious again. Why didn't you ever tell me you were struggling? Lillian lowered her gaze. You hired me to work, not to share my burdens. Arthur nodded slowly. And yet, you bring honesty into my home every day. I think I owe you more than a paycheck. He stood and walked toward the fireplace, staring into the flames. I spent my life testing people, he said. Waiting for them to disappoint me. He turned back, his eyes unexpectedly soft. Your daughter passed a test I didn't even know I was giving. Lillian's eyes filled with tears. I'd like to help, Arthur said. With school, with time off, with anything you need. Maya looked up at him. Does that mean you're not lonely anymore? Arthur knelt in front of her, his voice thick. I think it means I'm learning how not to be. Maya stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him before he could stop her. Arthur Whitmore, the man who owned cities but feared closeness, closed his eyes and hugged her back, realizing in that moment that the greatest truth he'd ever heard came not from a boardroom, but from a child who saw straight through his walls.